He had everything: a billion-dollar empire, fame, and the respect of the world. But behind closed doors, Ethan Carter lived in silence. For 10 years, he couldn't perform. Doctors called it psychological. He called it punishment. That was until the day he met her, Clara, a nurse with a secret of her own. And what happened next will melt your heart. If you believe love can heal what money never could, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. Because this story will remind you, the greatest miracles don't always come from medicine, but from the human heart. For 10 long years, billionaire Ethan Carter lived behind walls higher than his mansion gates, a man who had everything, yet felt nothing. Doctors called it trauma. Friends called it stress. But only Ethan knew the truth. He was broken in a way no money could fix. Until one day, a nurse walked into his home and did what a decade of medicine couldn't. She didn't just heal his pain, she changed his heart forever. If you believe that one act of compassion can rewrite the story of someone's life, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and stay till the end of this story. And tell us where you're watching from, because what happens here will remind you that kindness still exists. Ethan Carter was the name people once whispered with awe. The youngest billionaire to rise from nothing, the prodigy who built Carter Holdings from his dorm room and turned it into an empire that spanned continents. His face had been on Forbes. His voice once inspired crowds of dreamers. But that was before the accident. 10 years earlier, Ethan had been driving home with his wife, Natalie. Rain poured so hard it blurred the highway lights. One wrong turn. One blinding flash. And then, silence. When Ethan woke up in the hospital, his body was bandaged, his legs weak, but what truly shattered him wasn't physical. Natalie was gone. The woman who had believed in him before the world ever did, gone in an instant. Since that night, Ethan stopped being Ethan. He withdrew from everything: the boardroom, his friends, the world. His once vibrant home became a lifeless fortress. He dismissed every therapist, every counselor, every doctor who tried to help. They called it survivor's guilt. He called it punishment. For 10 years, Ethan lived like a ghost in a mansion of glass, watching life happen from a distance, incapable of feeling joy, laughter, or even purpose. His empire continued to grow, but he was just a name printed on paper. A man who could buy anything, except peace. Then, one winter morning, his assistant, Margaret, made a call that changed everything. She hired a nurse, a woman named Clara Reynolds. Ethan didn't notice her at first. He barely noticed anyone. He sat in silence most days, his face pale, his eyes blank as he stared out the window overlooking the empty gardens. When Clara first entered his study, she didn't say much. She looked around, the drawn curtains, the untouched food, the sterile perfection of the place, and simply pulled a chair close to him. "You must be Mr. Carter," she said gently. He didn't look up. "You're wasting your time." "Maybe," she replied. "But sometimes time needs to be wasted on the right people." That was the first time someone had spoken to him without fear. No rehearsed tone, no pity. Just quiet confidence. From that day on, Clara came every morning. She brought tea he never drank, books he never read, and stories he never asked for. At first, he ignored her. Then, he started listening, not to her words, but to her voice. It had warmth, like sunlight sneaking through thick clouds. Weeks passed, and Clara's presence began to disrupt the silence that had owned the mansion for a decade. She opened the curtains. She played soft piano music in the evenings. She even convinced Margaret to let some of the staff return. Ethan hated it at first, but something strange began to happen. He started waiting for her. When she missed a day because of the flu, Ethan found himself pacing restlessly. He couldn't explain why. He told himself it was habit, routine, nothing more. But deep down, it was the first time in years he felt anything. Then came the night that changed everything. A thunderstorm raged outside, the kind that mirrored the night of the accident. Ethan couldn't sleep. He tossed, turned, then finally got up and walked into the living room. There, by the dim fireplace, sat Clara, awake, waiting. "You shouldn't be here this late," he said quietly. "I couldn't leave," she answered. "You looked haunted." Ethan sank into the chair across from her, his voice breaking. "You think you can fix me, don't you?" Clara looked at him with steady eyes. "I don't fix people, Ethan. I remind them they're still alive." Something cracked inside him. For 10 years, no one had dared say his name like that, softly, but with strength. He started to speak, haltingly, painfully, about the crash, about how he had lost not only his wife but himself, how the guilt had made him feel like a shell of a man, undeserving of happiness. Clara listened without interrupting. When he finished, she placed her hand over his trembling one and whispered, "You didn't lose your strength, Ethan. You just stopped believing you deserved to use it." Tears slipped down his cheeks. The walls he had built, walls of shame, anger, and fear, began to crumble. From that night, something shifted. Ethan began joining her for morning tea. He walked through the gardens again, even if his steps were hesitant. He started playing the old piano in the hall, broken notes at first, but Clara never laughed. She just smiled and said, "That's the sound of healing." As months passed, life slowly returned to the mansion. The staff whispered that Mr. Carter was changing, smiling again, talking again, living again. But what no one saw was how deeply Clara had come to care. She wasn't there for his money. She wasn't there for the title. She was there because she saw something no one else did. A man fighting invisible pain, desperate to be reminded of who he once was. Sometimes, she caught him looking at her, not with attraction, but with something purer, gratitude, or maybe even hope. Then one morning, Ethan asked softly, "Why do you care so much?" She hesitated, then said, "Because I once cared for someone else who gave up before he healed. I promised myself, never again." Her words lingered in his mind for days. One evening, he found her sitting by the piano, lost in thought. "Clara," he said, "when you're here, the house doesn't feel like a prison anymore." She turned, smiling faintly. "That's because you finally unlocked the door." But fate wasn't done testing him. A few weeks later, Clara didn't show up. No call. No message. Ethan waited. Hours passed. Something inside him twisted. That old fear of loss resurfaced like a storm. He called the agency, but they had no record of her resignation. Confused, he searched her room and found an envelope on the desk. His name was written in neat handwriting, Ethan Carter. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter. "Dear Ethan, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. You were never broken, Ethan. You were just waiting for someone to remind you that pain doesn't erase worth. 10 years ago, I worked at St. Mary's Hospital. I was the nurse assigned to your wife, Natalie, before she passed. She asked me to promise her one thing, that if you ever lost yourself, I would help you find your way back. I didn't know how or when, until fate led me to your door. Thank you for keeping your promise to her, by learning to live again. Clara." Ethan's heart shattered all over again, but this time not from grief, from gratitude, from the beauty of what she had done. She had healed him. For love she didn't owe him. That night, he sat at the piano and played, really played, for the first time in 10 years. A melody Natalie once loved. And as tears streamed down his face, he whispered, "Thank you, Clara. Thank you for keeping her promise." Months later, Ethan Carter appeared on live television for the first time in a decade. He announced the opening of the Carter Hope Foundation, dedicated to trauma recovery and mental health care. He told his story publicly, but never mentioned Clara's name. Instead, he said, "Some angels don't stay long. They arrive, heal us quietly, and disappear, leaving behind the sound of hope." From that day on, Ethan wasn't known as the man who lost everything. He became the man who found meaning again. And though he never saw Clara again, every time the wind swept through the gardens, he swore he could hear her voice, soft, steady, and filled with light. broken doesn't mean finished. If you believe that one act of compassion can change a life forever, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more heart-touching stories. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments, and never forget, kindness is the greatest cure of all.